What up, everybody? Happy Wednesday, and welcome back to Two Guys and a Bard, your favorite Wednesday night Ashes of Creation show. And hello to my esteemed co-hosts. What is going on, boys? How are you doing?
Oh, I can't complain. It's been a good week. Obviously, there's some drama around Ashes.
Drama. We like the drama. We're here to spill the tea.
Gives us content, man.
Redbeard, how you doing?
Good. I don't like the drama.
All right, so the drama is, guys, it turns out It Slicker scammed Steven for $300,000 for gambling debts. No, different Twitch drama. There was some Twitch drama this week, though. I don't know if we want to talk about that, but first, I think we need to go around and figure out what we're all drinking. Boys, what are you drinking?
Okay, so I'm not drinking for a month, but I'm drinking tonight and this weekend because I'm going to a wedding. So I'm breaking my fast, but I have a nice glass of scotch with me. Macallan number 1.
Ooh. Are you doing sober October? Is that?
No, I just went to Vegas and we spent a lot of time very drunk, and I decided it was time for a break. But I had this wedding. I knew I was going to be drinking for that. You can't not drink at a wedding, right? So yeah, and then I leave in 6 hours for the wedding. Driving to the airport, but I specifically booked my flight so I could be here tonight.
Dedication for everyone in chat. Hearts out in chat for Bardic and rearranging his schedule. Dr. Captain Redbeard, what are you drinking? I'm gonna add Doctor in front of Captain because I think it makes you more esteemed. Honestly,
You can do Dr. Mrs. Redbeard, but
Dr. Mrs. Redbeard is true.
not Dr. Captain.
All right, Princess Redbeard, what are you
Princess
drinking?
Redbeard. Take one guess, Payne. Take one
I
guess at
don't.
what I'm drinking.
I don't want to because it hurts every time.
Just take a guess.
Okay, it's double blue raspberry kickflip 420 Mountain Dew. Boozy Mountain Dew.
With booze.
You know, Redbeard, if you want to Uber Thane a 6-pack of that, I will split the cost with you.
If
Just
you-
have to show up to his door.
Guys, and if you want to see a video, we have a nice high resolution video of me dumping all 6 of them down the drain in my sink. You can subscribe to us over on the YouTube, Two Guys in a Bar. Be sure to hit that button. It really helps us out over there as well.
That's alcohol abuse.
That is alcohol. I feel like consuming it is alcohol abuse.
No, it's just body abuse.
Body abuse.
Just regular abuse.
So which one is it? What flavor do we have tonight?
It's actually just that Smirnoff Firecracker stuff mixed
Okay.
in, and I ran out of Sprite, so I have Mountain Dew with it.
Yeah, fair. Oh my god, I love that the bot pulled up our YouTube link at the exact moment I dropped that line too. That's so strong. Let me tell you, Nightbot is doing the hardest work, the heavy lifting here on this show
The
tonight.
AI is learning.
The AI is learning. And I've got some water and I've got a little bit of coffee and Bailey's, though I have the world's most giant cup. It takes
I was gonna
two
say,
Keurig.
What the fuck? What
It
kind
takes
of
two-
tie-dye 90s shit is going on with that cup?
Well, guess who bought this?
Your mom or Drop Bear?
Drop Bear. Yeah. It's so big. 2 Keurig pods fill it, so it's like all the way down to like it's 1 Keurig pod and some Bailey's is all the way down to here. I don't know if I can tip it, but
So before we get into anything too serious,
okay.
I have to mention something amazing that happened in Discord today.
Okay.
Fane was there.
Okay.
We discovered a new color. Fane, would you like to explain to the audience what the new color is? And it's also the color of your beard.
So guys, there's some drama this weekend at TwitchCon. Bardic and I did not go to. So Bardic and I skipping everything actually might have saved our lives. I don't know. Did you guys see all the TwitchCon drama this week?
I saw some of it.
Yeah. Apparently, you can't jump ass first into a 1 foot deep foam pit. That's not good, and you will shatter your spine. So we had a near-death experience. We were traumatized, and
Listen. The fact that you got I give you guys shit, but you have at least 2 brain cells to rub together. The people who got hurt by that did not. So I think you would have been safe.
fair. Okay.
I also want to say that's just weak genetics right there. Like,
Yeah, it's true.
like I have landed ass first on a few things.
Let's just cut that statement right there. Clip it and ship it because
Clip-
that's the greatest clip of the night.
Clip
right
it,
now.
chat. I have landed ass first on a few
Bardic has
things.
landed ass first
Clip
on a
it.
few things.
Clip it, please, chat.
Have not broken my back,
And he's not broken his back. He is
but
a
I have
champ.
broken
He
a
is-
few
he is
other things.
Taking it like a pro.
But sometimes he lands ass first and he breaks a few hearts. It's just
He's got
it happens
He's got
sometimes. It happens sometimes. Nice, appreciate you, Cheese. So a little bit of drama with that, and then we did have some Josh Strife Hayes drama, some really big Josh Strife Hayes drama. But I
don't know about big drama,
It's-
but kind of Ash's focus.
he
kinda-
got the community
stirred
riled
the
up.
pot.
He got the
I feel
community
like
riled
it's
up.
only drama for Ashes. No one else gives a fuck.
Yes, you hear that, Josh Strife Hayes? You're washed. L+ ratio. You are just done. Just pack it up. You're done. But you know what? Before we talk about that, I do want to talk about the AMA this Friday, guys. Are you guys hyped for this AMA?
I'm hyped for the Alpha 2 release that they're
Because
gonna give us.
it was said somewhere on the internet that Redbeard would shave his beard if we didn't get an Alpha 2 release date during this AMA.
Been said.
It has been said. It is. Does anyone have that clip? You can put that clip in chat. Someone.
I just can't wait because I'll be disappointed that they didn't announce Alpha 2, and you guys will be disappointed because I'll show up on the next show with my beard still.
Nothing but
I
love here
mean-
on the show today, guys. Nothing but love. I'm telling you. But we've had 2 AMAs since, let's call it, moving forward in the show. And I've used this term in Discord privately, but I think this is, I think you guys can get behind me on this. I would say that from the time that we had that big influencer influx, we can call then, like the Asmongold reaction, the Shroud, the Tim the Tatman thing. I think we can call then to now very much the modern parts of Ashes of Creation. I feel like we're in the modern times of Ashes of Creation. But I think everything else is kind of left in the past. It was a little more nebulous. It's starting to sort of ramp up, and the community is becoming more lively. So I would say in the modern part of Ashes of Creation, in the modern times, we've had 2 AMAs. One on the MMORPG subreddit, and then Steven did one randomly in his house 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years in October, actually. It seems like he does one every October.
The MMORPG one?
The MMORPG subreddit that was hosted by Proto Bear.
Yeah.
So that was sort of an AMA / interview.
That was like a couple months after the Alpha 1, wasn't it? So that's
Yes.
like a year and a half now.
So that's like a year and change ago. And then 2020 I think we looked up the date, it was October 6th or 7th. So 2 years ago, we got an AMA, and that was post the July, August, September big push for that. So I mean, hopefully, is this kind of our new creative director's letter? Is that what we're getting now?
I think it's more just kind of a ramping cycle. I mean, we kind of talked about it a little bit last week. I think it's kind of the first official step, and then into them, whether or not like they actually announce Alpha 2 at the end of this AMA on Friday. I do think that we are going to, because this is happening, I would not be surprised if we have a quarter or a month or even a date by the end of the year. Like, I think we're kind of ramping into some kind of big news. And honestly, the only kind of big news is Alpha 2.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, sure that they can talk about systems and class kits and all that stuff, but that's monthly update news. That's not she's gonna get banned.
No, Nightbot, don't do it.
But the so I think it's more so ramping up into kind of a little bit of a marketing cycle and marketing the way that Steven and Intrepid market is kind of through having Steven appear on people's podcasts or, you know, AMAs, different stuff like that. So
yeah, I mean, we've heard rumors that there's going to be some interviews on other podcasts and other streams as well, and we'll have to see if that's just people talking or if that's actually going to pan out. Because if this is the start of the hype, then I agree with you. Alpha 2 date is very soon. But
yeah,
in the next few months, by December, we'll have an Alpha 2 date, if that's actually what's happening. But I will also say, and this is something leading into what Josh Strife Hayes said about having a core game, and all the stuff we've heard so far has nothing to do with the core game of Ashes, which is the nodes, which is the evolving world, which is the points of interest and how they open up and change as nodes change. And we have no information on that as of yet, really, other than like some very basic stuff like we've dropped our nodes down to 83.
Yeah, it's, you know, I hopefully we get something big. If we don't get Alpha 2, I would like to see something big. The big concern, obviously, in the community that consistently goes around is how, you know, we're only going to get 50% of the world. We're only going to get so much of the systems. We're trying to keep some of the discovery for when the game goes live. And is that harming the game as it, in terms of it going live in maybe an incomplete or bug-ridden state, which has happened to pick an MMO out of a hat, guys, to a lot of them, right? You try to hold something back to give a little suspense, and turns out that the part you didn't tested, that was the one part where something happened to go wrong when we put 20,000 bodies there, right? So and that's pretty consistent across the board. So hopefully we get something big or Alpha 2, and we can just get in there and start testing, start breaking some systems, because there's a lot of systems. There are a lot of systems, and I mean, you guys think that's a good thing? Josh Strive Hayes does not think it's the artist formerly known. Sorry, we canceled him. The artist formerly known as Josh Strive Hayes before he got L plus ratioed does not think that that's a good thing. If you guys haven't seen the clip that's around, it's on YouTube. Check it out after this show, because obviously, why would you leave this show right now? Redbeard's drinking Smirnoff Firecracker. How can you peel off of this right now? This is the best content on Twitch, guys, and on YouTube. Thank you to everyone who's watching us over on YouTube. Really appreciate those likes and thumbs ups. It's he had a take, and I just want to preface this for chat if you guys haven't seen it. He had a take. He said that we're not seeing anything solid. We're not seeing anything core, to Bardick's point. We're seeing ancillary systems that essentially, he said, belong in an expansion. We're talking about things that should be packed into an expansion. I think that most of the Ashes community, well, Redbeard has the conspiracy theory as to what he was actually talking about.
I mean, to me, it's not even a conspiracy theory. To me, it's plain as day based on what the most recent Pantheon update was. I think anything in relation to what he was talking about as Ashes of Creation, I think he literally mixed up Pantheon and Ashes of Creation. So I personally have not, like, in my own head, come down on him thinking that he's dumb or anything like that in that sense, because he is a very intelligent content creator. I mean, we've all watched his content, and he has very good points. I loved his video on kind of content creation within the MMORPG space when he had all the different content creators on. He does really good with scripted videos. I think he was caught live. I think he was caught having to answer a question that he clearly didn't want to touch. And I think it was his editor actually that was asking him the questions. Kept bugging him about Ashes, because I think his editor was wanting to get an Ashes clip out of him. But what he was talking about was more in line. It did, in the context of Ashes of Creation, it did not make sense. And so giving him the benefit of the doubt, for me, he was talking about Pantheon, and it makes sense based on the information that came about around Pantheon in the more recent weeks. Now, that being said, I can look past that, but then he, in that conversation, then made a statement about how MMORPGs are trying too hard to release with too much content on release, as opposed to saving content for expansions. And that is something I hard disagree with. And I think that it actually has been the issue for a lot of MMORPGs. For example, New World would have been better if they let it, I think you said earlier, Fane, in Discord, let it bake in the oven for 3 or 4 more months.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of that is just ironing out bugs and whatnot, but I would even argue and say that you let it sit for another year and you launch with all of the stuff that they have done so far to the game, both the tuning orbs, everything like that, and having a little bit more content in the game, because the content hit a wall very quickly with New World. MMORPG players are grinders. We're going to get to the end of the content very quickly, no matter how much you put in there. So if he's coming from that side, that you're never going to make anybody happy, then I can kind of see the argument. But I disagree with the baseline premise of just release some basic ass game, because that age is behind us. That is the old school WoW 15 years ago when WoW first came out, RuneScape. Like, that is not a modern MMORPG anymore. It's kind of like streaming on Twitch. You have to have the mic, you have to have the camera, you have to have the setup, you have to have everything ready to go, even if you want to be a basic streamer, because the quality level has gone up over the years. Streaming with your phone camera, your Nokia phone cam 10 years ago might have been good 10 years ago, but now there is a baseline. And I think it's the same thing that's happened with MMORPGs. People are expecting a certain level of quality when the game comes out to include how much content exists within the game. And I don't think that it's unfair for the community to ask that of the developers. I think that the developers have done a shitty job at adjusting to that market.
I mean, I think that's kind of something we've talked about in the past, right? Is that the MMO landscape has progressed, right? What people expect in just a baseline launched product is so much more than it was 15, 20 years ago, right? People now expect massive quality of life. People expect you to be bug free. People expect all the guild tools. I mean, that was a big complaint around New World, was there are no guild tools. There's literally nothing here. It's a page and it says, hey, you're in this company. Congratulations. Thumbs up, champ. And so it is becoming harder. And I want to give the developers, I want to play devil's advocate here. I want to give the developers a little bit of love and appreciation for the fact that it is harder. There is more to do just on the baseline. It's a car, right? You used to have 4 wheels and an engine. Congratulations, you're good to go. Now it's like, oh, and you want seatbelts and defrosters and seat warmers and air conditioning and Bluetooth capability and these things that were very, things that were 20 years ago fancy and advanced on a car are now just standard and stock on pretty much every model. So as the MMO space grows and new ideas innovate, they do need to be creating more and launching with more, just even as a base product. And that just takes more time and money at the end of the day.
And so, I mean, on his point of what he's basing his opinion on, I think, is what we've seen from games recently.
Mm-hmm.
And that is launching in a very base state and then improving. Like we saw that with Final Fantasy, right? It had so many issues early on, and then it made a huge comeback. And so he's looking at that and saying, oh, hey, you can just launch and then do that. But part of that too, I think, is how the developers are communicating. And that's what I think is different about Ashes, right? Like, because Alpha 2, for us, like Steven has said, it's going to come in at a somewhat finished state. We're not going to give you everything, but we're actually going to have most of the base systems. So we're getting Alpha 2. Alpha 2 is basically like the launch of the game for most other games, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's fine, but be clear about that of saying, hey, this is the basis, and then we're going to improve upon it. They're saying that, but launching it and selling it to the consumer as that without giving us the clear information of, oh, this is the test state. Yeah. This is like, we're launching it now. You can all play it. It's like Alpha 2 will be a persistent game environment. That's basically the launch of a game. But there's also a huge paywall. But that is a good thing if you look at it in the right way, right? It's going to get the people who are invested in it, the people who want to play and give good feedback. They want the game to be good. And so that's, to me, the difference between Ashes and every other game.
Well, and I think
it's launched recently.
I think another big thing here as it pertains to Ashes, and again, I think he was misquoting, but he was talking, his own words was saying Ashes of Creation. I believe he was talking about Pantheon. In the context of Ashes of Creation and expansions aren't going to work the same way that they do in WoW or SWTOR or Guild Wars or anything like that as they're going to in Ashes, because Ashes is going to be more of this is happening to the world now, and that's kind of considered the expansion and whatever comes in with that, but it's not going to look like, okay, we've unlocked a new, and maybe in the future that'll happen. Maybe they'll, unlock another side of the globe or something like that, or be able to go to another planet or something. Who knows? I mean, kind of the sky's the limit as it pertains to lore. They can just write whatever reason in to go wherever. WoW did it for 15, has been doing it for 15 years.
Yeah.
But expansions in Ashes needs to be, ultimately the point that I'm making here is Ashes needs to be fully fleshed out with all of the content that we're really going to have access to day one, because adding something in to a reactive world a year later is already going to present its own subset of issues. Mm-hmm. Adding a new area into WoW and increasing the level cap and just leaving the old area behind, that's not that big of a deal for them. They can do that in expansion format and add a new place in. You add a new place into Ashes, that's going to have a huge impact on the player base, on the world, because everybody's going to want to go experience the new content. And in doing so, the metropolises are going to de-level, nodes are going to de-level, because there's going to be more people focused on a new area. And so they have to be really intelligent with how they implement that new content. So that being said, they kind of do need to present all of this stuff day one. Mm-hmm. Now, if I kind of dissect what he was saying and read in between the lines a little bit, I think that I could get on his side if he's talking about scope creep, essentially, and that too much stuff is being added throughout the time of development, which again, he did mention. And again, I'm pretty sure he was talking about Pantheon, because everything that we are seeing in Ashes has actually most of the big points have actually been pulled back. For example, it was supposed to be 64 individual classes and not 8 times 8 to the fourth. Like the number comes out differently because you're not actually going to see major differences. You're just going to see augments to skills and abilities. You're not going to have completely different skills and abilities for every single class. So that's not individual classes in my head. That's been changed. The number of nodes has been changed. Yes, the map size has gotten bigger, but it's mostly been the water side of it. I guess you can maybe say the scope of naval has increased, but naval itself has been there since day one. And so everything that Intrepid is trying to do with Ashes was clearly laid out early on. The ideas may have been expanded upon or even reduced in scope, but it's not like Steven is like, oh, that's a great idea, let's add this in. And anytime he does try to do that, daily login rewards, not that that's scope creep, but anytime Steven's like, hey, let's divert from the original plan, the community goes, hold the fuck on. Like, we need to make sure, like, is this just you're seeing what we think about this, or are you trying to implement this? But I don't think scope creep is something that plagues Ashes of Creation. I think it's just a massive fucking project, and it looks like scope creep because people aren't used to. I'm not used to seeing this in an MMORPG, not let alone other people. So I think it's just a massive project.
Well, I think the other interesting thing is, like, he referenced WoW. Like, WoW did not release in the state it is now. And I'm looking at WoW, and literally, like, it had a wider world in the first couple expansions than it does now. Like, they have pulled back. They add a new expansion, so they do a reset. They add in, like, okay, here's the gear treadmill. Go ahead. But every time they add a new feature for an expansion, the next expansion, they just take it away.
Yeah.
So this is like, you're not actually doing anything with the expansion. So like, that was like super weird to me that he used WoW as an example. And I was like, that doesn't really relate here.
WoW's a bad example because the only thing that's expansive, that's expanding upon the previous version as it pertains to WoW, is the story. Everything else is the same, with the exception of the one new gimmick that they have for that.
Whatever your borrowed power system is for this expansion, and it does make the world extremely small, right? It does make the world extremely, extremely small because I'm only really interacting with this in the modern content. Everything else is just extra. Maybe I'll hit it up for some achievements. Maybe I'll hit it up for some mounts, but there's not really a ton of value in that kind of stuff. I want to address kind of a point that I spent way too many hours in Discord talking about, and I want to get your guys' feedback because you weren't there. When you launch with a system, it is introduced to the player. It is introduced from the earliest time that they are supposed to interact with that system. It is then expanded on and compounded throughout. And we can even look at like how a character develops. You start, you have a few skills, you level, you have more, you level, you have more. If they just dropped 28 skills on your bar from Jump Street, most players would be pretty confused with how to play their character, and they would be playing it extremely, extremely incorrectly, or extremely suboptimally, or not even in the top 60% of how they should be playing it. A lot of people are just gonna be like, this skill looks cool, and you don't realize like, oh, I need to proc this skill off this skill, and this skill off this skill. So there is kind of this thing where the game slowly introduces you to the world and your abilities within the world, and that increases as you're able to learn it, right? And there will be checks throughout to make sure you've learned it. If you start shipping stuff like this later, right? And I'll bring naval into the because people say save naval for an expansion. People keep saying save naval for an expansion, which is another bad take, in my opinion.
I would only, just to jump in real quick, I would only ever agree with that take if it wasn't integral to the world and the systems that they've already developed. And the caravan system, to me, is the number one reason why it needs to be in at launch.
100%, because if you put naval in later, you're changing how everybody interacts with the world.
Yeah.
Not only are no one's gonna be on land because everyone's gonna want to be on the cool new boats. To the point made earlier, where everyone goes to the new area, everyone goes to the new shiny. But you're going to affect the economy in major ways. You also are dropping full-fledged systems. So let's say there's a system, and by the time you hit max level, you're expected to integrate with 100% of it. And when you're level 10, they want you to have fun with 20% of it. And when you're level 30, you're up to about 45% of it. And in your 40s, you're at 75% of it. And then at 50, 100% of it. You're in with the whole system. When you integrate that in, you are dropping entire systems on the heads of players, and that can be overwhelming. You're putting 28 skills on their bar automatically, right? You're dropping this huge, massive system on their heads, and there's no way to then introduce that to them unless this system is only something you interact with at endgame, and then you have no experience with that leveling, and then you just consistently have that problem, right? There isn't a slow introduction. There isn't a learning that happens throughout people playing the game, and I think that's the biggest issue with bringing these systems in late.
So I'm okay with bringing systems in late. I mean, I think that's necessary for the longevity of the game overall. Is like an expansion should drastically change the meta of the world, how things are interacted with, and all that. My biggest issue is basically that we've come to be okay with playing a game for a month or two and then being like, okay, I've experienced everything. And that is terrible, because how can a developer ever keep up with anything if they're already behind, because a month or two after launch, everyone's bored of the game already?
Mm-hmm.
And so like you should be dropping these big systems in, but you should be dropping them in right, or like you want to look at that bell curve, right? And right at the point where it starts shifting to the back of the bell curve of people experiencing most of the content, you want to be able to drop something new pretty soon after that, right? Because then they're like, okay, most of the player base has experienced this. They're starting to get bored of the game. You're seeing a little bit of drop off, boom, big, like, instead of like the bell curve being like this, and like you're dropping the expansion back here at the tail of the bell curve, then you're going to pull back some people. But if you're dropping it like, you know, a third of the way back in the bell curve, then the players who are already still playing keep playing because, oh, new fun shit. And it brings back more people. Like, it's that cycle of making sure you like, because yeah, that's the issue. Like with New World, everyone dropped off so hard, and people will play the, you know, the server relaunch, but there's enough people that are just like, nah, fuck this, I've seen everything this game has to offer. And unless they release something absolutely amazing, you're just constantly like a wave up, like you're gonna see that decline, right? Like,
well, it's hard
with their crypto right now.
It's hard to get the bad launch taste out of your mouth. Like,
Yeah.
I enjoyed New World launch because I just love MMORPG launches, and I do that, and I think that the basic aspects of New World were enjoyable, but it was riddled with issues, bugs. There wasn't enough content at the end game, and so now here I am knowing that Brimstone Sands is coming out, and I have zero interest in going back. I might check out the fresh start servers, but there's a roguelike game that's coming out a couple of days later, and I would rather play that over New World. I would rather play a casual game over an MMORPG. An MMORPG gamer choosing a casual game over an MMORPG, and I think, granted, that's anecdotal, but I think that speaks to a lot of people. New World isn't going to spike up to the numbers. I think that model is okay if, in the terms of WoW, for example, they drop off and then they come back up, then they drop off and they come back up. That's fine. That model works for them. They're able to do that, but they also have brand loyalty, essentially, with WoW. New World does not have that, and so they will not see the same level of increase. I don't even think they'll probably reach 25% of what their peak was on launch. And so from that side, I think it's very hard for any other, everybody's trying to replicate WoW, but they're trying to do it without the 15 years of a game being out and having multiple expansions over those years. And so they're trying to replicate something that takes time, and they're trying to replicate it day one, year two. And it's just not, you can't do that right off the bat. And so what games have to do now, and again, this is going back to what a modern MMORPG is versus WoW back in the day, is they have to launch with more day one. They just need to, because New World launched with less, more is coming out. Yes, people will come back, but I would be I would like to see the number side of New World. Maybe they've made their buck back. Maybe they've made their money back, but I would be very curious to see how afloat AGS is right now, purely off of New World.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's a fair point, and I think it gets to like really the crux of all of this is Ashes of Creation sees a lot of hate. We've seen it. Everyone in this community has seen it. If you're in this chat, you've seen it's a scam. We all know it's a scam. 100%. It's a big scam. And now, you know, I think that we need to stop letting MMO developers off on these half-finished projects with the hope that the next expansion will make it more like WoW. The next expansion will bring it back to life like Final Fantasy 14. I don't think I think that those are exceptions. I don't think they're the rules. Now they're the big players in the market because they are the exceptions, because the rules just die. The rules just go away, right? The ones that don't get better, and I'll bring it up, and, you know, for those who are still playing bingo because you're a solid G, I'm going to bring up WildStar. WildStar never came back, and they added stuff to that game, and it never came back, right? That is the rule. ESO had massive problems on launch. SWTOR had massive problems on launch. And there's a community there, but it's not that big of a community. Not really when you're comparing it to these major monoliths that are standing in the gaming space. And I think the key here is to just really encourage developers to launch a finished product. Don't use excuses like this of, well, they should just save these for expansions, or this just needs to come later. If it is in the scope of a game and you want it to be integral to the game, bring up the naval, you want a system that ties into the other systems and feels natural, it needs to actually be launched with the initial product. You can't be launching things like that later, or else people will be clamoring for it down the road. So I would just say stop giving excuses.
Well, and I think it's something that you see the scummy development studios, not necessarily the studios, but the parent company of the studios, Destiny, the Destiny franchise, as an example. Destiny 1, the end of Destiny 1, for anybody who knows Destiny, you'll understand what I'm saying here. The end of Destiny 1, the game was very good. It was very enjoyable. There was a ton of content to do. It felt, and I came in late to Destiny 1. Did everything on 3 characters. The people that I was working with, like I was playing on Xbox, the people I was working with were playing on PlayStation. So I went and I did everything again on 3 characters on PlayStation. Destiny 2 comes out and there is less content in the game than there was in Destiny 1. It felt like a huge step back. But the moment that Destiny 2 came out, they were instantly talking about, I think it was the Witch King, the Witch Queen expansion. Maybe there was another one in between there, but and it was very clear that they held off on content so they can do that whole hype wave thing, right? Mm-hmm. People come in, they're hyped, they're playing the game, they release the basic version of the game. Now that might be a little bit different because that's just withholding content rather than continuing to develop content. But to me, it comes across as a very scummy, big name parent company bullshit, like Activision, EA type of a thing to do, as opposed to let's launch a good game from the start. And had Destiny 2 launched with everything that was included in the expansion, launch, I think, would have gone over a lot better because there would have been more content to do, because people burned through stuff. There would have been more raids to do, more dungeons to do, or I forget what the expedition, something like that. And so, I mean, that's just another example right there of a lot of the Destiny community who played D1 at the end. And then once D1 went down and D2 was live, everybody's like, this is it? Like, this is all you have? And so I feel like the majority of the gaming community is against Josh on this because people do want more on launch, and it is kind of expected, whether fairly so or not, that the market is presented that way. Mm-hmm. And so we can sit here and say the market needs to change their tune, but I think that this is, and we've talked about stuff like that before, right? Expectation of casual versus hardcore. What should a casual player expect out of Ashes versus WoW? You know, they need to change the tune a little bit on what is casual, because casual's gone too far casual. I don't think that this is an unfair step for the community to take and say, we want more out of launch. We want more of a game on launch. And I think that Intrepid is trying to provide that.
Yeah, and I mean, just looking at it from the developer standpoint, I can see the appeal of going the way Josh Strife said, and that's launching an incomplete product. Part of it, once again, is money, right?
Mhm.
To like when you're looking at the amount of money it takes to develop a modern MMO, going back to what we were saying, the bar has been raised now. You cannot just develop an MMO on like a couple $1,000,000. We're looking at hundreds of millions to develop a fully fledged MMO. And so I do get that aspect, and that is the barrier to entry for us to get really good fully fledged MMOs. But, if they want to do it right, you got to stop looking at the modern gamescape, right? Like what is happening recently, and go back and look at what has been done in the past that has launched these titans. What launched World of Warcraft? What was it that made that game so good? And like when you look at the sub count for World of Warcraft, you saw it, like it just steadily rose. It obviously had some dips, but it kept steadily rising. And what did they do that made them have that increase of growth constantly and retain players? And to me, that was launching a pretty fully fledged game with so much to do, and then keep on, like, the first 2 or 3 expansions up until Cataclysm just expanded the world. So like you just had more to do constantly. You always had more to do. And obviously, like, everyone's now trying to copy WoW. Adding more to do with achievement systems, mount farming, all this. It's like that's been done before. You got to find something new and innovative if you want to be this titan.
You bring up a good point in that kind of asking what did they do at the time. I feel like they did what Ashes is trying to do right now, and that's they're trying to look at what is currently on the market, and you can do a comparison. And because they're going, the sand park side, you can do comparisons of Mortal Online. You can throw WoW into the mix. Like you can throw games that are definitely more sandbox and games that are definitely theme park, and they're trying to take systems that are kind of a collection of all of those and provide them within this game. And I feel like that's what WoW did. I mean, WoW got shit for it by people who were hard into whatever game they were playing at the time and were like, oh, WoW just stole all the ideas from all the popular games and just put them all together. Yeah, they did. And they did it successfully. And they did it by offering more in their game on launch for the time than the competitors were doing. And so I feel like the natural progression of that is that mindset continues. It's just what you need to provide now is more than what the competition is providing on launch. And I think Ashes is going to, they're attempting to set the new bar for that, whether that's their goal or not. Like that's one of the either intended or unintended consequences of implementing all of these different things at launch.
I mean, I think you're bringing up, there's a really key thing that you said there that I think development and game companies really need to just hone in on. And that is that, WoW stole all these ideas, and it's something we've heard Steven say multiple times, right? Of this other game had a great system for this. I'm not reinventing the wheel. I think that makes so much sense, and I think it really needs to start being everybody's motto. While we are demanding more from games now, we are demanding more from your MMO. At the end of the day, most of what we want, 95% of what we want, has been done before. The blueprint exists. You could probably even buy that string of code for a certain amount of money from some of these developers and from some of these old games. It's out there and it exists. So the excuse of, oh my God, it's so much for them to create isn't as much of an excuse anymore, right? You can develop a game, you make its architecture, and you say, how are we going to do dungeons? Well, here's 10 examples of how different games did dungeons. Oh, how are we going to do raids? Here's 10 examples of how different games did raids. What should we do about the economy? Here's economies that worked out really well, and here's economies that turned out really, really bad with massive inflation. What did they do right and what did they do wrong? I mean, New World, WoW, to an example. WoW has, I don't think they have huge inflation for how long they've been around, but I remember playing Classic and being like, I have 20 gold, I'm rich. And then I got into retail and I'm like, I have 200
20
million
million
gold.
gold. Yeah.
I'm average. Awesome. Cool. Right. And so you could, I mean, I think you can say in a very real way, not anecdotally at all, that if you know, in modern WoW, the barrier to entry to earn all of that gold is a lot harder. It is another barrier. We did not have enough gold sinks in our game. What did WoW do wrong? And then find a game. There were plenty of games where people were broke all the time. Everyone was scrounging for money and they quit because they're like, I don't like having to do 6 hours of farming to enjoy 3 hours of raid night. So, you know, probably too many gold sinks. You can definitely look at the roadmap exists now. When WoW came out, you had an idea. You sort of had a general idea. I mean, WoW was, you know, Spanish colonialists going across the ocean. It was Christopher Columbus, right? We sort of think that there's another piece of land if we sail in that general direction, but don't let the sirens and the mermaids get you. And nowadays, if you're an MMO and you're trying to develop an MMO, you have like high-end GPS technology. You can see exactly where everything is, what's right, what's wrong, and you can get to the point from point A of my idea to point B of a launched product much more efficiently and much more quickly. The biggest issue I think that we're still going to always run into, and I think that this is becoming more and more of an excuse, is, well, the players are going to just consume the content so quickly, so let's just hold back this segment of content for the expansion. I think that is a marketing gimmick. I think that is a sales gimmick. I think they are trying to bring in a little bit more, but it's always going to be a problem until we can get to the level of AI writing these games.
I will say the only thing, like, so that holding back of content only comes from the idea of a loot treadmill. It comes from the idea of here's new content, but it's also just power increase. Like, instead of looking at this as horizontal progression of let's do more things in the world that all ultimately contribute. Like, so like what I'm thinking of here is like, you want a diamond, right? And you want like the base power to be down here. And then like all this stuff to happen, but all this to feed into the ultimate power increase. So if there's all these extra things to do and they're all fun and engaging, like that's the key. Like just adding in a grindy aspect that like, oh, I have to do this to get my power increase versus like with Ashes, it's interesting because everything is not bind on pickup. So it's not this static thing of like, here's the only way to get gear. You can add in all these different paths and ways throughout this diamond that ultimately contribute to the top triangle. And I think that's a difference that a lot of games have fallen into in trying to copy WoW, which is just the loot treadmill. And they saw that. I mean, I'm pretty sure all of that came from a basis of Diablo. Like Diablo ladder seasons is the basis of modern MMOs, I'm pretty sure. Of that reset, everyone starts over, boom, you see a huge influx of people. Blizzard saw that and was like, how do we implement this into our MMO?
Well, and I do think that it's important that you do have some kind of power increase.
Some, yes.
Because in talking about the diamond, if you're adding more stuff on the horizontal side, but you already have people who are at the power peak, you're not actually adding in more content for them. You're adding in content for the people who are slower. And so you kind of like, I do think that it does need to expand out, but it also needs to go higher.
Agreed.
Well, and I want to make a counterpoint to that. Guild Wars 2 has done this in an amazing way, right? They said when they launched, they had a dozen or so legendary weapons. They said, when you get this weapon, it will always be the strongest weapon in the game. And that turned a lot of people off of like, well, what's going to happen down the road? But then they kind of expanded the center of the diamond without really ever increasing how high the peak would go, simply by saying, okay, well, now all of these base classes, you have 2 different specs you can choose from. Now there's even more legendary weapons. There's legendary armor and legendary trinkets and rings and things like that. And we're adding more to it. And there's always more to gather based on how you play your character and based on the preference of how you interact with the world. But if you got that legendary sword on launch, on vanilla, essentially, that's still the strongest sword that you can get in the game, or on tier with the strongest sword you can get in the game. And I think you can increase that without necessarily having to say, because anytime you increase the power at some point, you will just be taking everything that was achieved below and throwing it out, because it is no longer relevant for those people that are trying to reach the apex of the diamond.
So what I would say is that that's two different types of people, right? Super is very much power creep. He wants to climb. He wants to get the best of the best. And there are people who love that Guild Wars. Oh, here's something else I can do in the game, even if it doesn't increase my power. It's something to do. And so I would say, honestly, finding a balance to bring both types of players together into one game is important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to need to find that way to increase it, or to create more content. Now, I have a question for you, Bard, because you had said that, holding back some of the content is good. If Ashes said, we're releasing with 8 raids in the world, go find them, but we have another 10 behind it already planned, and so you're not going to have as many raids, and we'll launch those a year into the game, would you be okay with that?
So it depends. If I'm over the game in 2 months, I'm not okay with it. If there's enough to do in the game, and it's not just grind, right? Like, I'm not looking for enough to do in the game that's just like sit here and farm monsters for the next 10 hours to gain a small increase. Then, so it's all about balance. I'm fine with them letting us know all the content they have planned coming up that they're holding back on, as long as they've given us enough to do for that year up till that point. As I said, it's about that bell curve. And yes, when Ashes comes out, I'm probably going to be, very high in that bell curve, because I'm going to be playing nonstop. It's the reason I'm working as much as I am right now. So I can do that. But yeah, so it's all about, like, don't hold back on the content, but have content ready to go. And that goes back to, how can a developer ever catch up if they release a game that people are done with in 2 months? They can't develop new content in 2 months.
No. It doesn't exist until we get AI that can go into your game and say, this is the kind of quest that people interact with the most. This is what people like the most. This is what people spent the most time doing. Okay, we're going to AI automatically just create new characters and new storylines and new versions of these quests to constantly put in the game. But when you get that, you're probably going to end up leaving a bunch of people behind, because it's going to be constantly trying to create something new for the new player. Some games have done micro expansions, is how I've heard it referred to, where every 3 months you're getting a large, not a large, but you are getting. So let me roll this back a bit. WoW releases an expansion. It's a big old hunk of content. There's raids and dungeons and skill and gear increase and cool new mobs that are going to tell you the exact same story. Did you guys know Sylvanas is bad, but sometimes she's good, but sometimes she's bad? She's essentially the Darth Revan of WoW.
Do not. I hate you so much.
I knew that was going to trigger him. He had been quiet for too long, and I knew that was going to trigger him. Oh my goodness.
How dare you? How dare
I'm about to get ratioed. I'm about to get ratioed, guys. Literally, Redbeard is going to ratio me.
No, it's not. No, if that's your take, you're not. That's too low IQ for me to even respond to. You're not going to even understand what I have to say.
That fair. I did come here on the short bus. That's true. But they release a huge, every 2 years, huge piece of content, massive piece of content. Does it make more sense in general? Because we are talking about expansions here, and I do want to get your guys' opinion. Does it make more sense? And let's take this out of Ashes for a second. To release that massive piece of content every 2 years? Or does it actually make more sense from what we anticipate, obviously Blizzard knows because they've done it, to take that, chunk it up into 6 pieces of content and release it every 4 months? Add to the story every 4 months.
I think in terms of WoW, it makes sense because the world, they're no longer expanding on the world, they're expanding on the story. They're replacing the world that we were playing. That's what their big expansions are, right?
Yeah.
And then the every 3 to 6 month thing is a new raid tier with maybe 1 or 2 new dungeons, an expansion on whatever gimmick they have going on, a deeper dive into some kind of power creep system. And so I think for that game and for the way that they do it, that makes sense. Like, and I don't necessarily think that, because to me, there's a difference between we have plans for content and we have content ready. For Destiny, it was very clear that they had content ready and they were intentionally holding it back.
Yeah.
I agree with Bard to the point, especially the example of that you gave, Fane. If they have 8 raids, that's huge. I mean, let's just go ahead and assume on the small side 3 bosses per raid. That's a lot of content, especially considering that it's content to find it.
I'm saying 8 raids in the world, maybe only 1 or 2 of them is can ever be procced at the same time. But the fact that it exists there is enough for you because there's a carrot. Let's find the new raid is always the carrot, and let's find the new raid is a 3-month goal, because the 1-month goal is, well, we better siege down that metro first. That thing's gotta go, you know.
Yeah, and you don't know how long that'll take. So by that aspect, I think it's kind of, if WoW were to do that and they said that we have the next tier kind of ready to go, but we're just not going to release it because this is the cycle that we've gotten our consumers used to, I think for WoW that makes sense. I think for Ashes, it only makes sense as long as there is enough content, and that's where I agree with Bard. If there's enough content for people to be doing to get us to that point of the 10 new raids being introduced into the world, I think that's fine. Because again, it's very different because of how the world is the players are impacting the world, and the world is unlocking the raids. So it's more like Steven is flipping a switch and going, okay, 10 new raids are active, go find them. Like, he's not coming out and saying, here's this new island that has 5 raids on it that you instantly have access to. Enjoy yourself. Like, we have to go through the work and the effort of actually unlocking it and finding it. So it's a very weird comparison. But as a general standpoint, as it pertains to mostly theme park MMORPGs, I am not a fan of them having content in hand and just holding back. Now, if they have ideas of content, that's fine. Like that's great. That's what we want. We want to see that you are already thinking about the future. I would love for, like, if Steven were to come out, I mean, I'll say the statement and then my thoughts. If Steven were to come out and say, oh yeah, this is what we want to do for an expansion, or whatever an expansion would look like within Ashes, I think that would be great from the standpoint of, okay, at least they're thinking into the future. But then my next, that would be my internal thought. My external thought would be, let's get to launch first.
Yeah,
but yeah. And so, like, I take it back to vanilla WoW. They launched Burning Crusade before 95% of the players, probably 98% of the players, had even stepped into Naxxramas. Like, I was in high school at the time. I was playing like hardcore. My guild fell apart trying to kill the first boss in Naxxramas. Like, we spent 3 weeks, 5 days a week raiding Naxxramas and doing all the shit that was entailed of farming the world bosses. So we were spending like 4 or 5 hours a day before every raid, getting everything ready for that raid. We failed to kill the first boss of Naxxramas, and then they launched BC. And so that's what I look at is like if you're launching new content before like the hardcore player base, or like before like the semi-hardcore player base has even gotten to all the content, then that's okay. It's fine. Like, you want to be to the point where it's hard enough but engaging enough that you still have the players there trying, and then you say, okay, we have the new content coming out. And part of that is also looking at, like, obviously BC was a full reset. With Ashes, we're looking at potentially like, oh, there will be a small power increase, like looking at the diamond, right? There's a new power increase, but there's also a new branch to the diamond. Here's a different way to play the game that adds to your power, and suddenly you can go back and complete that. Because, I mean, yeah, I remember back in the day of WoW, and like, you would literally be going back and running old school stuff. Like, you'd be running Molten Core for certain items that would help you in the current raid tier. That doesn't happen anymore in WoW. Like, once you're done with a raid tier, there's no reason to ever go back.
Or the only
And-
time that it does is when an item is too overtuned, and then the previous tier is stronger than the current tier.
Yeah.
But yeah, that ends up getting nerfed.
But
pretty
like,
quickly.
hey, like the reason to go farm for your Thunder Fury bindings. That's like, yeah, I get it. It kind of sucks to have to do, but it's also continually engaging content, and it's an entire guild gambling for that drop. Because I can tell you, when we got our Thunder Fury bindings back in the day to drop from Molten Core, like the screams in TeamSpeak were just like, yes, we don't have to come back here anymore. Like, it was like such a good feeling. So it's just a balance of like making sure that old content doesn't just like become obsolete, and like why, like if you've spent, you know, how much money and how many developer hours developing a piece of content, it shouldn't just fall off completely.
Yeah, it's I think that's one of the biggest issues that we're running into in MMOs is that the content is no longer relevant down the road. And I think this really does hurt the people that come in 6 months, a year, 2 years into the game. I mean, coming into Shadowlands being my first big play in WoW, my first even full expansion. I only really raided the first tier. I would say that I did 100% of the relevant content, right? We AOTC'd Castle Nathria. We did that whole thing. So I did 100% of the relevant content. And that means that I've completed 5% of World of Warcraft. I've 5%.
1% at that point.
Potentially 1% at that point. You know, there was so much that I didn't do and interact with. But because it's not useful, because it's just stuff in the past, it is wasted effort. Right? It's wasted effort. It is it's the concept of people making, you know, to an extent, people making YouTube videos theorizing about a video game before it launches, and then if it launches in a different state, all that content is useless. It was a waste of time. It may have gotten you clicks then, but it's not going to get you any more clicks now because no one cares about what your opinion was 4 years ago on the game. It doesn't really exist, right? So it is relevant for the marketing beat and for the money coming in when it does, but it's not relevant in the modern sense of relevancy. And I think that's something that games really need to start to get away with, because if you're going to put the effort and the money into doing something, you need to keep it as relevant as long as you possibly can. I do want to answer a couple questions from chat, guys. I know we don't normally do this, but Bergen had a couple good ones. Is the board of trustees a problem in the MMO industry? And I think by the board of trustees here, he's meeting investor shareholders and all of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Specifically with the AAA studios, yes. It's one of the main reasons why we're so excited about Intrepid and Ashes of Creation, because Steven has said, go fuck yourselves. It's my game. It's my money. We're doing it the way that I want to. It'll come out when it's ready to go. And I saw you give a look there. It's his money that either he's spent or we've given him to spend.
I've given him a decent amount. Is all I was going to say is I've given him, I know Bergen in chat has also given him a decent amount.
but you've given him the money to make that decision.
Yeah.
You didn't give that to Steven and then he has to give it to EA.
Just let me get my meme in one time. One time, Redbeard.
I'm going to cut you off, Revan hater.
So salty. Guys, thank you for being here at the last episode of Two Guys in a Bard ever. Redbeard and I are going to duke it out in the parking lot afterwards, and one of us is going to end up dead, and it's probably going to be me.
So definitely from the AAA side, I think it's an issue. I think we see a little bit of a different issue from the indie studio side, where stuff gets released too early because they need the money. And and it's kind of, it's the same effect, but for a different reason, that, you know, something gets pushed to early access, something gets released too early because they need more funding to be able to fund the game. And so I feel like Ashes is in that sweet spot. But to answer the question 100%, it's an issue more so with AAA than anything.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's interesting because, I mean, I do have a business background and I'm looking at a board, and you're supposed to bring in a lot of different perspectives to a board to make it successful. And I am kind of curious. I've never heard of this on a board of a big AAA company, but how often do they bring in a hardcore player? How often is a true gamer on the board giving them actual feedback on a video game as a service?
0%.
Do you want to? Yeah, I'm pretty
No.
sure it's 0%, and maybe there's 1 or 2 gamers on a big AAA board being outweighed by all the people just looking at the money.
Mhm.
And it's that's not a successful business. If you're looking at a true board that is going to be successful, you're getting a bunch of people that are very familiar with the product or the service provided by the company on that board to give feedback of, well, this is what the customer wants. I don't care what you guys want or what you think is going to make you money. If we can't provide a good product, the company fails.
Mm-hmm. I think there's an unrealistic timeline, right? Is what you're talking about, Bartek, is that these guys have an unrealistic timeline of, I put in $100 million. This guy put in $100 million. We would like to start to see a return on our investment. And to the extent you cannot throw money down the empty pit of a game, right?
Yeah.
If you threw infinite money, if you said you have infinite money and infinite time to develop a game, you would be looking at Star Citizen, right? It keeps getting bigger, more money. I mean, it's raised more money than it's raised more money than some seed rounds of Fortune 500 companies, right? It's well over, I mean, what was the latest number? It's approaching $1 billion.
I mean, if that's true, that's insane.
They just passed 750 million. They had a $450 million seed round, and people are still buying ships. It's insane how much money. So you do need somebody there. To Bartek's point of having a more diverse board, you do need somebody there to say, listen, we need to pull back. We need to hold. We need to release. At some point, we need to release. Here's the scope. We can't release with all of this. We need to take a chunk out and release a product and then start iterating upon that product. To that extent, that does need to exist. And I think Redbeard brought up the best point of these indie games, these small. Valheim was the one that came to mind when you mentioned that, Redbeard, of we need some money so that we can keep making stuff. And then even they have been just inundated with bug fixes because they never thought this many people would be playing their game. And it's been a year. Their 1 year roadmap, their 1 year roadmap, we're now well into year 2 for them. And they've done one of the 4 things they said they were going to get done in the first 12 months. So it's money doesn't always necessarily even solve the problem either.
Yeah. And so that comes down to basically, and what you were talking about, of people wanting the investors, the company wanting return on their money. And when you look at something like Shark Tank, right? Those investors are looking for a quick return on their dollar. That is not an MMO. There's this is not going to be a quick return, and people, or the video games and the companies and the investors who get into this need to realize that there's a lot of potential to make a lot of money, but it's not a quick turnaround. You invest, you spend the time, you make a really good product, and you will make money, but it's not a year down the road. It's 5 to 10 to 20 years down the road.
Oh yeah, I'm not a financial advisor, but I will definitively say, do not invest in MMORPG if you're looking for a return.
It doesn't make sense.
Just don't. Even any amount of money that Fane has put in, I've put in, Bart has put in into Ashes of Creation, we're not going to get a monetary return on that. It's a time return. It's an enjoyment return that we're hoping for. We can't even guarantee it. Now we think that the project is more set up better to provide that return than other Kickstarter and crowdfunding games have been, but there is still no guarantee of that. And you want sound financial advice? Don't invest in an MMORPG in any way, shape, or form,
or crypto,
or crypto.
That can be the quick turnaround Shark Tank.
You can make some quick money with crypto, but
you can make quick money.
But
it's like penny stocks. You can make a lot of money. You can also lose.
It's MMOs are kind of like the restaurant industry, right? Is you're going to put a decent amount of chunk of money into them, and MMOs are it's like opening up 500 restaurants simultaneously. But at the end of the day, like a good percentage of them are going to fail, and you are just going to take it on the chin, and you just have
And
to
not
be
only
okay
that,
with
but
that.
you're not going to see a return for a couple of years because you
Uh,
got to get
on the
you gotta
ones
get
that
out of the
fail,
negative first.
Yeah, you'll never see a return on the ones that fail. The ones that fail will not make it long enough to get you to the question of New World and how much money have they made. If there had been one investor who had invested in it, which I guess there was, Amazon Game Studios or Amazon parent company, they have not seen the ROI, a direct ROI for that. I can guarantee that. They just, best case scenario, if you look at their numbers, they sold 3 million copies. That's what, $120 million. The game took a lot more. Lumberyard. Now you have the indirect benefit of Lumberyard. You have the indirect benefit of engine licenses, so they might still turn a profit yet. And Amazon doesn't seem to be worried about losing money. But if you were an individual investor investing in that game, it's going to take Steven forever to make his money back. It really, really is. He's not going to see his money back for years, but he'll have a game he enjoys playing. And I think that's really cool.
Still waiting for the day that a game announces they're using Lumberyard.
Any day now. That's actually going to be in the AMA. That's the one. That was my bet, is that we're switching from UE5 to Lumberyard now.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, that's the big announcement here. Get ready for it, guys.
So we're going to be able to gather everything, right?
Wouldn't hate it. Wouldn't hate it. Let me tell you. Would not hate it. All right, boys, but that is about it. We want to thank everyone so much for being here. Bergen, Gil Marino, thank you so much to our new followers. Really, really appreciate it, y'all. We are live every Wednesday at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific time, talking about Ashes of Creation. I think next week we should dive into the AMA, and you guys can come get our hot takes on the AMA. Before we do that, let's get some outros, and let's start with Bardic.
I'm Bardic. Not making a lot of content right now other than the weekly podcast. Whenever we get into that next hype wave, I'll be back at it full time. Which, I mean, we all know is coming Friday with the announcement of A2, right? So, we'll see what happens. But you can find me on all socials, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, @Bardic.
Redbeard.
Captain Redbeard, here on Twitch and YouTube. I do want to respond to Baba. Baba does bring up a good point. We do need to show the loyal followers some love. Thank you to all the people who have been hanging out, with the exception of Baba. Go fuck yourself.
Got him. Thank you. I was hoping you said that. Yes. I love that.
Faint's just trying to get. He's hyping up my response there because he doesn't want me to kill him after the Revan content, or the comment.
That's true.
But
I didn't think about that, but yeah, I'll take bonus points for that as well. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to next week as we kind of go over the AMA and everything that is with that. I do want to kind of publicly throw out an idea. Is I would love to go through the questions that maybe didn't get answered, or even the ones that did, and do just like a quick, like just burn through 50 questions and just if it was a good question or not. And I just want to see how many shit tier questions there were that we can get through in like 10 minutes. I think that'd be hilarious.
I'm super down to do that. We can we'll get together early and we'll do that. Let's Redbeard, let's get on that this Friday.
Yep. But yeah, Captain Redbeard here, Twitch, YouTube. Really busy with real life stuff right now. Trying to get to the tail end of purchasing about 20 acres, and then a bunch of craziness will ensue with that once we actually own it. A lot of work will get started. So I said it last week. I know I've made plans for even just regular Twitch streams, but a lot of that stuff is up in the air right now. So I would appreciate the follow, but don't feel obligated to. You can catch me here every Wednesday for sure.
I have a question. When you get the 20 acres, can we come and do the show live from the 20 acres one day? Can we do that?
No, because that requires you to know where I live.
Can we do it in the woods outside of the 20 acres?
And I say that knowing that I've literally sent you the link. So
Yeah,
you
yeah, no, I know. No, the meme is strong. Redbeard, you're not supposed to tell him that part. Guys, you heard it
I've
first
sent you
here.
stuff. I know where you live right
We're
now.
going to do it live from the 20 acres. We're more authentic than the Yard podcast. We might as well be bigger. I expect 150,000 subscribers on YouTube.
We will do that if you show up in your Snorse cosplay.
Yes.
If someone gets me a Snorse plushie, I will wear it 100%. And we'll
Just
make a
the
fire,
plushie.
and the
Just
three
the
of us.
plushie.
Oh,
So, and then
you
then
want me
the
to just tape
fire,
a
and we're
plushie
gonna-
around my? I'm just totally naked. A plushie taped around my waist. Is that what you're? Is that what you're asking me
That's
to
a
do?
really nice way of saying it's on your cock.
Nope. I'm gonna shoot that one down real quick.
And fade.
End the stream. Just end the stream.
Guys,
Just end the stream.
real
Just
quick,
end it.
2 points to make. Itsfade.com for all my socials. It's going to be great. Follow me over there. I uploaded some Ashes TikToks. Want to see how they're doing TikToks and shorts. So you can catch them on YouTube as well on my After Sanctus channel. And remember, sometimes you tape a Snorse plushie around you, and sometimes you